If you're watching this, you can probably get pretty good color most of the time, but there are times when pretty good isn't good enough, and sometimes you need perfect, and that's where this little card really earns its place. I've owned it for a while, but I'm trying to get a lot more disciplined about actually using it. It only takes a couple of seconds on location and then another minute or two in Final Cut, and I've got what I call a color datum, a true zero. On the water, we have chart datum. That's the lowest astronomical tide, and everything else references that number: depths, clearances, predictions. For video, I want the same idea, a color datum, something where you start from verified accuracy, and then from that point you can be as creative as you like. When the goal is to make the absolute highest possible quality work for your clients, color that's close enough just won't do. Skin can look a tiny bit off, the color matching between products can drift, and that can make the whole edit just not quite sit right together. Having this idea of a color datum removes the doubt from that, and it makes it sure everything's repeatable when the pressure piles up, be it from deadlines or just client correspondence. Out at sea, having that sort of certainty is non-negotiable. In the heat of a rescue, I need to know with certainty whether we can get the boat into a cove, across some rocks, or across a shallow to extract a casualty. We try not to guess. We can reference a fixed truth, chart datum, which is based on the lowest astronomical tide. And then we have tools at our disposal, electronic charts, tidal information, and depth sounders on the boat. And in really shallow water, we literally have a stick we can assemble and manually sound the depth. In video, the ColorChecker is that same discipline. It gives me a color datum, which is a verified zero, so every correction and every creative grade after that point hangs off something known to be true. So I'm not just eyeballing it, I'm navigating from a charted baseline. A quick note before we continue. The ColorChecker Passport is preposterously expensive for what it is. I think I paid north of $120 for mine, and it feels extremely plasticky, and it's quite unpleasant to actually interact with from a tactile point of view. However, unfortunately, it's the gold standard. There are also a few cheaper options that basically do the same job. I found a couple on Amazon and I'll put a link in the description below. I actually had and used one of the cheaper versions before and it was totally fine. The only reason I bought this is I actually misplaced that inexpensive one. The moral on that tale is be careful with your stuff, but also that the workflow matters much more than the brand. This card does two jobs. Number one, it acts as a post-production baseline. Give the editor, or me, who's normally the editor, 2 seconds of the chart, normally where the face lives on screen, and I can verify exposure, neutralize color casts, and line up primaries, all without leaving Final Cut. And the second thing, it allows me to reference exposure on location. The middle gray patch allows me to set a reference exposure using false color normally, and once I've nailed that reference, then I use that again as my exposure datum, and I can choose then from an informed perspective whether I'm going to go over or under exposure as part of the brief or my creative look. And however I choose to expose the scene, I'm doing it from a position of knowing exactly where correct exposure lives. And that's kind of the whole point of the tool. In this case for exposure, I can be creative, but through choice and not just accidentally. Everything is done with this datum in mind. Sony, Red, Canon, Blackmagic, Panasonic, Fujifilm, even iPhone. This works the same. If your camera or monitor can show false color or a waveform, and Final Cut can show scopes, you can build the same baseline and get the same result. We're in a standard Rec. 709 timeline using Final Cut Pro. If your footage is log, you can apply a camera LUT to normalize, or stay in log and shape it with curves. Try and pick one path and don't end up double normalizing. Step 1 is always exposure. I'll use the 3 big chips in the Passport: white, grey, and black. In Final Cut, Effects, Draw Mask, mask around those 3 chips, zoom the viewer so that the chips fill the frame, and now the scopes only see them. Open Color Inspector and go to Color Wheels or Color Curves. Black, just above 0 IRE. Middle grey, around 40 to 45 IRE, neutral base. White, below clip, roughly 90 to 95 IRE. Small moves here are important. When the waveform shows 3 tidy rungs, at 0, 40 to 45 and 90 to 95, exposure is set. Now for reference versus creative, if the brief wants a stopover for a bright commercial feel or under for mood, you do it after you've confirmed the reference. So you're starting from a known truth. That's your exposure datum. A quick addendum from me during the edit. The image is correctly exposed, but for the color card and not actually for Meg or necessarily the scene. The reason for that is the color card is actually on the shadow side of her face and the light source is off to the left of the image. It's only a small difference in actual distance, but because of the way light follows the inverse square law, even that small difference in distance can make quite a visible difference to the overall exposure. So I'm going to speedrun correct for that now. With exposure set, we neutralize color casts and align primaries. Switch the waveform to RGB overlay. Open color curves for red, green, blue. For each channel, set a shadow point to line up black, a midpoint near 40 IRE to line up grey, and a high point to line up white. You'll see red, green and blue stacked neatly at each run. Cast gone. Add a new draw mask around the passport colours chip column. Open the hue versus hue curve and use the eyedropper to set pins on red, yellow, green, cyan, blue and magenta. Another quick interruption from me, Editor Jack. I don't think I actually explained what it is I'm monitoring. So on the vector scope you can see those distinct coloured lines. By adjusting the hue versus hue points that correspond to each target on the colour card, the aim is to get those coloured lines directly aligned with their corresponding axes. And remove the mask. Skin to the skin line. Skin should trace the skin tone line, a warm tilt between red and yellow. With the eyedropper on skin, tiny nudge towards the line, sample cheek, and make the same tiny hue nudge, then clear the mask. I prefer a subtle shift. And now to summarise, I'll just show you where we started with a flat log image, each step subtly improving the image to the point where it has the highest level of colour fidelity, leading to that true colour datum. Creative lives after the base. Lock the technical base, then stylize with curves. Film at contrast, grain, LUTs. Keeping looks after the base means every camera lands on the same starting line. And here's how I use the passport to set a reference exposure on location. Hold the chart where the face will be, ensuring it's in the same light as the subject. Tilt it if needed to remove glare, especially on the glossy black, and use false colour in the camera. Aim the grey patch to sit in your monitor's middle band. That's your reference, and from there you can bias brighter or darker for the creative. But the key is you're doing it knowing where correct is, and you're choosing intentionally to deviate from it. And so that's it. This is the good habit I'm trying to make sure I'm a bit more disciplined with including in my workflow. It only takes a couple of seconds on location and a minute or two in Final Cut Pro afterwards, and that gives me the perfect and completely repeatable color datum. And the best thing, it works on any camera. I use it on the FX6, the A7S III, the Red Komodo X, and I'm even going to give it a go on my iPhone. If this is something you're going to incorporate into part of your workflow, give this video a like and it should help other people discover it. And in fact, even better would be to subscribe to the channel. That would be fantastic. My name's Jack. Whatever it is I'm doing here, I'm calling Western Approaches. I really appreciate you taking the time to watch, and I'll see you next time.